So yeah, I'm with North End Organic Nursery, and like yard manager, I kind of do a little bit of everything there. And here today to talk to you guys about kind of my favorites in my own yard, what's available, and kind of what does well in our area. I'm a recent homeowner, and instead of kind of fixing up my home, I went straight to the yard and dove right into removing a lot of my lawn. One thing I do encourage, because it was a little overwhelming, is don't overwhelm yourself right off the bat with removing and adding things. But anyway, I like planting everything. I've got a just pollinator section, which is a lot of hybrids and just things that do really well and look beautiful to us and also still can help insects, along with on my other side where it's going to be just native plants that I just kind of let them do their thing. I put them in and kind of let the ecosystem work its way out. A big thing that Jess mentioned is habitat loss again with the lawn. So I think that's the first thing that as homeowners where we drive out south or we drive up north, we see a lot of plants that you just don't see in town anymore. But that being said, what's kind of cool about owning a home in Boise, I think, is you kind of think of us as being a desert, but because we've planted all these big trees and we have homes, there's opportunities for shade-loving plants that might live up in higher altitudes or also have room for desert plants. If I just start with the spring going down, one of my favorites, and I wish I had a presentation for you, but I can leave these out if anyone wants to come check them out. But this is called Prince's Plume. They're lovely. I've seen tons of them out in the desert near Hagerman. They're one of the first things to bloom in my yard. They get these awesome yellow fiddle leaf flowers on them, and one of the reasons it's my favorite is it just took 2 seasons for it to bloom, and I've found tons of insects in there that you just wouldn't normally see on other flowers. It's herbaceous, so it regularly dies in the fall, and little cleanup in the spring, it just reemerges.
Would you pass the tag around so we can...
Yeah, I can do that. Sure.
I hope you get it back, but for me, thanks.
It's going to be a little dirty. I saw blue flax up there a lot. That's that little, I call it a dainty little blue flower, almost translucent. It reseeds itself really well, so it's a really nice one to start with in your home garden. In my opinion, once it gets going and you let it do its thing, I have it popping up everywhere. And from there, I can kind of pick and choose if I want it to grow here or there or just kind of let it do its thing. But that's an early bloomer as well, but a little longer into the season as well. And a nice, easy one for any beginners. Globe Mallow is another one of my favorites, and it complements that. Oh, yeah, thank you. Complements the blue flax amazing. It's another early bloomer and a long bloomer. It's orange, similar flower, incredibly drought tolerant. I literally don't water this thing at all. It got planted, watered in to establish, and that is all I've done with it. Again, another plant where I've just seen incredible native insects that you just don't see on other plants. This is a globe mallow, and there's a few different species. This happens to be a Monroe globe mallow. Am I just going to keep bringing them around? Yeah, you bet. Another one that we started carrying, and it's quite fun. A lot of people think it's sagebrush, but it's called bitterbrush, and it's one of the first blooming things you'll see up in the foothills. Incredibly drought tolerant, and it's just really fun to have in my yard. I got one about this size 4 years ago, and it's still about that tall. They're incredibly slow growers, but it's a really fun one. When this one gets big too, this is going to be an awesome one for bird habitat. They get really contorted and just a nice large shrub. Already birds are starting to land in it in mine just to get to some of the feeders, the bird feeders that I have. Of course, I think we mentioned this one before. This is a Firecracker Penstemon. Now, not so much native to Idaho, but to the south and southwest of the United States, but this is probably one of my favorites to watch the hummingbirds come to. It reseeds itself again really well, so you get one in and kind of let it do its thing, and you'll have them kind of popping up everywhere.
So far, everything you've grown is a perennial?
These are all perennials, yep. This, a Firecracker Penstemon, it's a short-lived perennial. So typically, they'll reseed themselves really well because it's not long-lived. Let's see. And then I think this is something that's going to be popping around a lot. It's called fern bush. Also not necessarily completely native to Idaho, but regionally native. Insects love it. Even just our honeybees, our non-native honeybees, absolutely love it. Another one that is incredibly drought tolerant and one that I just don't water, not even one bit in my yard. It can get rather big, which is nice for some texture in your yard. It can get 3 to 4 feet tall and wide.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Let's see. I guess kind of where I'd left off a while ago was working with the light you have. My native area is on a strip of my house where kind of the front half gets a lot of sun, and then the other half is dappled, and then on the north side of my house, so it gets 0 sun, and you can still find plenty of natives that'll go in there. I've got plenty of heucheras. My golden currant, it's a shrub, does really well with low light. It's also an edible berry and great for birds and other insects, hummingbirds. If it's blooming when they're around, we'll get to it.
I didn't mean to be such a pest. Thank you.
Columbines are a nice versatile one. You can get them into full sun and in some full shade, and there's lots of varieties that are native to our area. This one happens to be the Rocky Mountain. It's a purple and yellow, large flower. It's gorgeous. Let's see. Another direction I like to go, this is a Vancouver jade Kanikanik, but it's a Pacific Northwest. So in my yard, I move from kind of Idaho desert, and then I move into a kind of a shadier Pacific Northwest where I've got elderberries and the golden currants. I put ferns in there. I wanted to bring some ferns, but they haven't started emerging yet. But they can still be incredibly drought tolerant. Sword ferns and deer ferns, once they get established on the north side of my house, get no sun, and I water maybe just a few times a year. That area does get mulched. I try to leave bare dirt on my native or desert side. But yeah, it's incredibly drought tolerant for a fern. This is Kanikanik. It's an evergreen, so another habitat kind of producer, and it'll creep and be a ground cover. Filling up. Rabbit brush is another one of my favorites where it took a couple years for it to actually get into bloom. This is a rubber rabbit brush or gray rabbit brush, but it only took a few seasons before it started blooming, and I saw just incredible beetles and all kinds of insects that I've never seen in my yard until I put this one in.
Right faster.
I'll talk a little slower. And then grasses. I just brought an Idaho fescue. It's probably one of the most common ones we see. I also like a big basin rye. But they're a nice one for filling in spaces and adding texture. It's a great habitat for ground crawling insects. I've even seen my birds getting at the seed heads in the fall. And we have got plenty of grasses and such alike. Going back to planting everything, Gallardia. We have native Gallardia. Now this one is a hybrid. So it still has that nice big flower. It's long blooming. It's drought tolerant. I would always encourage, there are some flowers out there that aren't even close to being a North American species. However, I think hybridizing some of our native species isn't entirely bad when you might get more bloom time out of them or more drought tolerance to them. And yeah, Gallardia is another one that pretty much blooms from the spring till the fall. It's a nice one to deadhead if you want to, or you can just kind of let it go.
What kind of soil does your beard tongue take? The red?
They do pretty well in our, most of us around here have a pretty clay soil. And it does well where I have it, which is just clay. But if you've got a sandier soil, it'll do just fine too. This is something you'd want in a lot of sun. Yeah, not on like my north side of the house. Yeah, lots of sun. Lots of sun. Most penstemons, there's a few penstemons, like our little leaf penstemon and the Rocky Mountain penstemon. They can do a lot of shade, and they're a nice one that reseeds really well and does well in a lot of other conditions. I also forgot some seeds, but a couple others. I know, kind of like I said, getting overwhelmed with trying to do too much all at once. Doing plants like this can start adding up. There's some seeds that you can always toss in, like the blue flax. One of my favorites is not Idaho native, but to the west is Phacelia, or bee's friend. That's another one that's incredibly helpful to our native bees. You'll see all kinds of halictids and minor bees and everything all over it. And it reseeds itself really well. You put one plant in and you're not going to get rid of it, which is great. So I'll always pass that one along to people because I know you're never going to get rid of it.
The name of it again?
It's bee's friend is its common name. Yeah, and I don't have the seeds for it. Another one are just sunflowers, our western sunflower. And I leave those up all fall. My birds use them to hang out on in the winter for the feeders, and then of course they're grabbing the seed out of them in the fall and into the winter even. Gallardia, that same one, from our local seed company, Snake River. They've got a Gallardia, and that's another really nice one you can just kind of toss out. It's inexpensive, and most likely you'll have at least half of that pack popping up if the conditions are right. We brought a couple other guides. I don't know if, we have a ton, okay.
Everybody can have one of those.
So a few different departments put this together, and it's been quite helpful to look at. It's got pictures, all kinds of different flowers, and ideas for different yard types as well. And we'll have those for you. One of my biggest things I encourage people when they want to start a native garden is just to go hiking. Go hiking, bring an ID book or some kind of app that's going to help you ID something. If you like it, bring it to the nursery, ask if we have it. If we don't, it's something we can get on the list, and there's tons of growers, especially now, that are focusing on propagating new native plants. I kind of wanted to mention was, your native plant, your native section doesn't need to be just, for wildlife. I have my amelanchier, or it's called a service berry, which I leave most of it to the birds, but it's also edible for us. Same with the currant. It's a nice one to have for a nice snack outside, but also available to all the critters that come in and out of your yard. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes for question and answer, and then there will be more time then for more questions as well. So.
Yeah.
About native grasses. Are the grasses beneficial? Like
Oh.
Idaho fescue and
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
but they don't flower, so no beneficial.
So most of, if not all, are all wind pollinated. So there may be very small insects that, we're not aware, or that I'm definitely not aware of that utilize them, but exactly. And it's diversity, and it's habitat.
So you planted some native grass?
Oh yes, absolutely, and it breaks up your bare soil where you've got your pockets of shrubs and flowers, and yeah, it creates habitat. If you were to lift up on your grass, you'd find all kinds of things resting in there in the 105 degree days we have, and
And I think some of the ground nesting bees, am I right? They nest close to the grasses because it's undisturbed.
cooler. Yep,
And
that too.
cooler.
And carbon sequestration with those.
Thank you.
really
Yeah,
good rates.
yeah, yeah.
So how soon can we plant this year? Do we have to wait until after the snow is off shape or be?
No, with a lot of these have been outside for over a month now.
So-
A lot of these have been just outside in their pots all winter. If you can dig a hole, you could plant.
I could plant now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you do anything with endangered species at all?
Do I do anything with endangered?
You know, the nursery, do you track or offer for sale anything that, would replenish a particular plant?
I mean, other than just having native selection, nothing like no program or anything. Yeah. Another one that I didn't bring was our milkweeds. If we're talking about the monarchs and trying to drive those back through the Boise River corridor, that's a huge one. And those have not started emerging yet either. Otherwise, I would have brought some of those in for examples. Yeah.
So you pretty much just not, once you've got it established, you just not water it at all?
So for a lot of these, that's kind of my tactic. I kind of like to give them tough love. There's some, of course, that are going to need some supplemental water, but for a lot of them, for a lot of my shadier stuff that do require a little bit more water, I'm still not watering them more than once a week. I'd say July and August, I'm soaking them, of course. I don't have drips next to any of them. I'll go out and just hand water, and I'll do that once a week in the hottest of the year. But like I said, sagebrush, a lot of the sagebrushes we have, tridentata, and Vasayana, there are a lot that just, a few different species of sagebrush that you just really don't have to water at all. And if one perishes, they reseed themselves pretty well, and you can kind of just, one will establish next to it, and I'll just let that one go. But yeah, once these get established, when I mean established, you will need to water them in, especially when it's a transplant. You'll need to give them supplemental water, at least for the first season. But once they get through their first winter and get that natural water, typically they're pretty self-sufficient if it's in the proper spot.